Should we pop this?
Well, first you have to tell me what it is.
Oh.
It just looks like a fancy bottle. And you normally, like last time you brought an entire suitcase, I tell people that opened up, and instead of like gun holsters in there, you had bottle holsters.
Bottle holsters, yeah.
Yeah,
and then we give you the gun after you have all the bottles,
right.
so it's helpful.
That's what I needed.
This is my favorite tequila. It's called Tapatio Excelencia. Now, every tequila has a nom. See that nom right there?
Yeah.
And that tells you what distillery it's made at. So this one happens to say, somewhere here, it should say La Altina, somewhere around. Yeah, La Altina, right there.
Yep.
So this is a distillery that makes a variety of brands. They make Ocho. They make a few other tequilas. Some tequilas are made in factories where they take the same stock, Blanco or Reposado or Añejo or Extra Añejo, that is made to a baseline standard, and then they blend it with agave spirits or variations, and they make different flavors. They put a label on it. The Kardashians sell it, and then we all drink it and think it's the best thing ever because we don't know anything. This is truly aged. It's one of the oldest tequilas. I believe it's 8 years. There's only been 2 batches that have ever come out. It is unobtainium. It's unobtainium because I bought every bottle left in the world. So
Did you really?
Oh yeah. You would have a hell of a time. I don't know where this one came from. This one was US sourced. I bought them in Europe, in Mexico. I've gone nuts. The aftermarket has like gone. This was originally
like a bottle of Pappy now or something.
It is. This was a $140 bottle. I just looked right before I came here. I just happened to look, and Fruit Bat was selling it for $1,139. The same bottle. $1,139. That was $138. So
you want to crack that?
Hell yeah.
Well, then let's get after it.
Yeah, you'll love it. Thanks
for the cup.
If you're a bourbon tard, you will no longer be a bourbon tard.
I'm actually I've really gotten into my tequilas lately, and I haven't drank as much in the last 4 or 5 months because I've learned that there's something like I'm allergic to the alcohol. Like I break out in nudity and then sometimes handcuffs, right? I'm trying my best to drink less of it. Yeah. But I've never had such a fancy bottle.
Good start.
I'm going to wait for you.
In a Quantum Loophole cup, of course.
Yeah, man. I'm fascinated to keep going down this pipe when you're done because I'm trying my best to keep my mouth shut.
Give it. Cheers to the Quantum.
Salute, man. Salute. Congratulations for your guys' success.
Thank you.
I'm not even a little surprised. I actually want to learn more about what it is that you see this becoming, because I do think over time as an outlier, when in the right position to effectively drive that amount of change, you have the ability to move the average up, which means it could change the industry. And everything that we were talking about is how our industry our industry changes because of every other industry, I think is probably where I got lost. But what I'm really trying to say is we have the ability with this industry to change humanity. And that's what I was telling Christian. He's like, poking me, like, what's this about? I'm like, look, this is about changing society, humanity, community, everything. Mm-hmm. And what I meant by that was, on a selfish level, I love data centers. You know this. But I really love helping my fellow veterans get jobs when they leave the military. So that, like, every opportunity is another void that I get to fill with another one of them. Although simultaneously, I'm pot committed to the fight of what's going on in this industry, the challenges with the supply chain, silver tsunami, power, whatever it is. And I want to help advocate for those on those platforms. We have our conference in this. And my thing is I think that you're halfway there, right? It does require someone with a few money who is an industry disruptive change agent, someone that could go in and inject an idea that everyone says is impossible, and then that changes the entire industry, right? Much like what Elon did with PayPal and that almost turning into its own currency, right? But he changed the finance space, changed the automotive. There's not a manufacturer that doesn't have an EV model of some kind right now, right? Does McLaren make an EV?
No, they make hybrids.
Okay, well,
so
there you go.
The P1 hypercar was a hybrid. The Artura is a hybrid.
They're faster? Are those faster?
They're faster because of your baseline speed, right? When you hit, just like electric, if you're in a Tesla, when insane mode or whatever else, a plaid Tesla, and then you floor it, it'll actually make you sick. It's so fast, right? It makes your stomach go to the back of your spine. So they use the electric power to fill the lag that sits inside turbos. I am
real nice,
huge. Isn't that amazing? Yeah,
it's fantastic.
It's my favorite.
It just occurred to me how smooth that was.
Oh, it's just it'll if you're like I said, I call bourbon people bourbon tards because they're goofy and they're going down the wrong path and like they're drinking their cool. Oh, my friend's got bourbon and I got my best bourbon. I'm like, you guys are missing the boat.
This thing is bomb. Actually.
You can drink this and not have a hangover tomorrow. You and I could split this bottle. We'd be wrecked. We'd be slurring and it'd be really funny. And we'd definitely be Ubering home and we'd sleep like a noodle. And we'd wake up tomorrow and we might feel lethargic, but we wouldn't have a headache. And you do the same thing with bourbon, you'd want to die the next day.
Yeah, I definitely don't.
This is not Cuervo Gold that everybody had in college that caused caused convulsions on the floor. I had that happen. I didn't drink tequila for years. My wife turned me onto it. So
I think that everyone has to go through that passage where you're drinking Jose Cuervo until you were like, I'll never drink tequila again. Until you're old enough person where you're like, Scotch or tequila? I'll try the tequila. I guess, Yeah. I'm a big Scotch fan, but obviously someone turned me on to tequila about a year ago, and that's all I have. And I went through, those Clase Azul bottles, like I probably had a couple dozen of them just as
the little ding ding bottles.
Yeah, little decorations.
That's one you've been marketed to, though. I kind of mentioned where the nom. And so what they do is they sweeten it. This one's not sweet at all, right? Not at all.
It's fantastic.
When it's sweet, it's because they are legally allowed. It has to be. So tequila must come from Jalisco. It must come from the tequila region. Has to. You can't have an agave plant grown just outside that border. It doesn't qualify. So it'd be a different kind of spirit. A whole bunch
of whiskey, probably.
It'd be a tequila. It'd be an agave spirit. So it'd be a racine or mezcal. Mezcal's amazing. Mezcalerias, they make them in these. They're usually little villages and they're smoky, and I love that. I'm a mezcal nut too. But tequila must come from this region. But when you get something like a Clase Azul, they're selling you a bottle, and they are legally allowed to put agave syrup into it, because it's from that region. As long as that syrup came from plants in that region, and they sweeten it.
They check
because we chubby Americans, you and I aren't. I'm less chubby because I've been dieting, but we chubby Americans in this country are like, yeah, we like our sugar, So that's what they feed to. So that's the difference. This is the real deal right here. But you're talking about industry change and having the gumption to do it. So there's a couple of ways to look at the believe me, the utility.
I didn't fast forward you through this, man. Stop and go back to where you were before we started.
I am. All right. Because I'm stepping right back into it. There are the giant utility companies, the Exelons, Dukes, Constellations, Nexteras, so on and so forth. They are very tuned into this and this problem, and they're talking to all of the hyperscalers and data center providers and technology, everybody's, and trying to figure out how to develop energy in partnership with them to produce this. So you're going to see a lot of, I think in the future, a lot of microgrids, meaning non-grid interconnected. And we talked earlier about the battery side, but truly non-grid interconnected power production on or adjacent to the campuses being built for data centers. Now, I don't know what scale. It might be 100 megawatt peaker type turbine or something like that. Or it might be maybe somebody goes big dog and does 500 megawatts, or maybe they get gigawatt scale. I just don't know. But that is definitely going to come, and it's going to be the end users driving it. Now, what you've also seen is Microsoft is very visibly hiring nuclear engineers.
I saw that.
Yeah. So that means, they're going to make that investment. Now, again, mark my words, it's 10 years out. Even if you went with a traditional approved reactor, let alone, I didn't even touch on molten salt reactors or helium reactors or all these different ones that are coming out.
I would not try I wouldn't go with like you said, I would go with things that have been tried and true already.
Yeah.
And I came from a submarine background where I know it's possible to live safely next to a reactor.
You and Dan Golding too.
Right. Well, he's
Dan, a nuclear engineer.
You know what? So he was a instructor, I think, at Power School.
Mm-hmm.
So my thing is we know it's safe. You're not hearing stories about American nuclear.
There's been 3 accidents. 3 Mile Island, human error.
But it wasn't an accident. That's saying that when the UPS fails on a data center and it goes into discharge and it transfers to something else, that's the way it's designed to be, right?
Isn't 3 Mile Island still operating? I believe that there was.
All I'm saying is the
radioactive gas is released, but everything didn't have a full meltdown.
Yeah. You're right. Everything worked by design. It was designed for not have a catastrophic meltdown, and it didn't have one. So I'm like, everything worked by the design, so it was not a failure.
At the exact same time 3 Mile Island happened, which was the first big accident in the world. Right? There were small lab accidents.
Secondary coolant water leak, I think, right?
Right, exactly. Well, they thought there was water. They thought there was too much water in when they were getting incorrect readings from bad valves and gauges and things like that. You think about the reactors, and they were very manual. That actually preceded a huge amount of change around automation and simplification.
That was it.
if you look at the nuclear rooms of the past, it would have actually had like a hexagon with all the different rods in it, and literally sitting there. So I brought you a cap, so just in case for the childlike self in you.
Like I said.
And you could actually see all the rods there, and it was just, there were so many lights that it was a flood of information. At the exact same time 3 Mile Island happened, you had the China Syndrome movie came out.
Oh yeah, I mean, it was horrible.
Yeah, with Jane Fonda,
and then all the concerts that followed.
Yeah, so the next reactor accident was Chernobyl, and that was
a real problem.
That was pure human error. Absolutely pure human error. There, if you watch the movies and shows, they're like, that was impossible. That can't happen. But the arrogance.
They shouldn't have been doing what they were doing. They should definitely not have been testing the way they were testing.
No. And that one was a full meltdown. I mean, absolutely catastrophic and destroyed the area for years. So then, and then the next one was Fukushima, which was natural disaster, right? And nobody could have anticipated that, they had all these safety features.
From Fukushima, did they?
Oh, lots of people. It's the people who went in who actually who dealt with the aftermath. There's people who they
are dead now.
Oh yeah, there's some people who died. Yeah, absolutely. They went in and actually sacrificed themselves to do that stuff.
They're probably the older people, so that's their culture.
The long-term contamination, the release of all of this radioactive water into the ocean, which dissipates it. Now you have to remember. The ocean is an interesting thing. I'm a surfer. I love the ocean. It's given me amazing things in my life, including the potential for skin cancer, because I spent all my time out there.
It'll rot wood, it'll rust iron. It can do it all.
It can do it all. But what's interesting about the ocean is that the Chinese have just developed a process to extract uranium out of the ocean. There's more uranium in seawater than there's anywhere in the terrestrial sites that we mine in the country today or anywhere else. So they're just, Is
that interesting? I mean, I wonder if the juice is worth the squeeze, right? You're talking about discharge.
Economically, it's not there yet, but they'll what they're trying to do is not have a reliance on Russia or the U.S. or anywhere else that actually has large deposits, right? So of terrestrial deposits. And in the U.S., of course, we're trying to excise ourselves from any Russian supply, particularly refined from uranium-235 to uranium-238. They're doing all the refining and then giving us that end state material. What's interesting when you look at those three accidents is I would probably say the worst is Chernobyl because of the effect.
No doubt.
And that came down to—
That changed everybody's optics too.
It did. And it came down to the Russians hiding it because Fukushima was very visible and exploded, and that was awful. But that was nobody's fault. Nobody could have anticipated the tsunami. It was terrible, and the economic impact was brutal, and who could have known that? Chernobyl was pure idiocy. And so my ex-wife was Hungarian. When she was in school then, they weren't told about it. They were part of the Soviet Union, right? Yeah. They weren't told. They were eating fruits and vegetables as the dust clouds were coming over, and and everything else. And now the long-term effects of that, massive cancer rates and all these different things. Now then there's the global cancer rates from nuclear testing that we did. That shit's bad.
That's a different monster altogether.
Terrible.
I don't know, not just the fallout of people's personal health from the tests and all the actors that were filming movies in the areas in which those tests have been done. But what was that impact on? I mean, is that
measurable?
But on the ozone layer as an example, right? I mean,
I don't think it affected its ozone layer, but it
global warming from nuclear reactor or nuclear weapon testing.
It could have been dust that's stayed in the stratosphere, things like that. There's, I know that there's a huge business mining metal, and there's actually piracy. You're not supposed to touch ships where certainly there's fallen soldiers that are under the ocean. There's treaties around this, yet you have ships going out and going through, and all of a sudden these they're going out to divers are going out to research the ship and do something, and it's gone. They're like, what happened? Because these vessels are going out and mining that metal because it has no radioactive isotopes in it. Metal anywhere else that's from our post-nuclear era has radiation in it, so it doesn't work with medical instruments and a lot of other things.
For real, I didn't know any of
that. That metal is super valuable because it's steel it's been below the ocean from before we were testing and blowing up nuclear bombs. It's just luckily, like if you look at the reactors doing it, like in Livermore, the fusion reactor there was designed really literally not to create energy, but to test nuclear explosions by taking 2 gigajoules of electricity into these lasers, which is like the whole grid, but focus in these lasers to ignite and create a plasma fusion situation to understand nuclear explosions in theory and testing without actually blowing them up, doing any underground testing or anything else. So, which is awesome. And there should be no more testing because it destroys the world. From a cancer perspective, who the hell knows? Because the data, that from before and after is muddy. But certainly I think we've got an accelerant of cancer rates around that and things like that. Going back to the reactor side, traditional reactors like a 300 reactor, Rolls-Royce's reactor. So GE Hitachi or Westinghouse or Rolls-Royce, kind of the dominant reactor producers that I would rely on, are all going to be pressurized water reactors. Next gen reactors, I would say they're 20 years out in reality. The testing's being done. It's all there. There might be small scale things, but for our scale, which is truly... which never was in our thought process, gigawatt, like who would ever think gigawatt, right? But that is really where everything's going. We're certainly the first, and certainly there's other people coming out of the woodwork doing the same things that we're doing.
They're definitely trying. Look, everybody's going to try to take a page out of your playbook. The first one through the wall is the bloodiest because you have to deal with all the lessons learned from the authority having jurisdiction locally to whatever the neighbors are going to think and whatever the regulation is. But there's so many things that you're flushing out. You're wringing out the systems.
Absolutely.
Okay. And then others, the second iteration is always faster, whether it's those that were copying you and are going to plagiarize and pick up where you left off or take a page out of that book at least. But at least, no one's going to be able to do it as fast and agile as you can again, because that's still there first, right? No matter what you tell them, the first time you cook anything, you're going to burn something, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So the more proficient you get at it, because the more you do it and you have a huge campus. But I do believe that model is what we're going to. I think that that's the model that makes the most sense. I think the only thing that's different, and I didn't realize with what you were doing, was to create you're creating a major campus, a purpose-built campus, master planned to support gigawatts of end user capacity from operators or enterprise end users. And at the same time, you obviously have to be careful about the ripple effect you have on the ecosystem that is in orbit of you, because you will be a massive generation of jobs and tax and money you have an impact on the community.
Well, look, imagine this table here was our campus.
Right.
And it was in Ashburn. Now, if I said, and our campus was 2,000 acres, and I said, hey, I want you to take, out of your 2,000 acres, take 500 acres and make it parks. What would you say to me? You'd be like, you're crazy. That's like gold. There's no way.
Yeah.
We have almost 500 acres of green space and parks and trails through the campus that are designed to be a community. Like literally think about it like developing a beautiful master plan community.
Will it be like a walking plan? So
absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. So
trails, and it's going to connect Adamstown, which is you have Adamstown and Carrollton Manor and all these different things, which are very tied to our Declaration of Independence. If you think about the names I'm saying, that's the history around there in Maryland. Just to the south, and they have no bike paths or anything connecting up to the city of Frederick north. So we're the first part of that catalyst to connect it. That we firmly believe in that. We firmly believe in tying together the community. That's a huge difference.
Repurposing a distressed asset in that community is already the first difference.
Absolutely. And the worst thing that could have happened, it's been interesting meeting with neighbors. First they were received with suspicion. Then we had some, as we're developing this and going through our growing pains problems. And then we had to do a lot of community reach out to, hey, we're just, us and who we are, personally meeting everybody, sitting in houses where 20 neighbors came together, just 20 neighbors. But that was really important. And we do that over and over and over again. We're hiring locally, doing all that stuff because community outreach is everything. But understanding we're good people who care about the environment and are trying to do things differently than what they might see down in Loudoun County. Not that Loudoun County is totally bad. Some projects are great, some are bad. It's growing pains of the industry. I don't know of anybody else doing what we're doing in core internet exchange markets at the scale we're doing it at, because it's immensely hard to find the gold in those markets.
That's also where you go the deepest at, probably.
Because of my network experience.
Right. Yeah. That's your secret sauce probably for you, right?
It helps. We have really core energy talent. We have core land talent to understand entitlement and sewage and water and all those. It's pain in the butt stuff you don't think about, but it's truly necessary. And it is much more difficult at scale. geographic adjacency to the internet exchanges. That's where the network team comes in, and we're unrivaled. And that's just a history of building those things. And it also comes into the fact that our team is so from the industry that when we pick up the phone, the hyperscalers answer. They want to be a part of us because they trust
they know what
us.
you're doing.
Our single flaw is we have one site. So, until we get other sites, so if I call that hyperscaler, they're like, nah, Maryland's not for us. We're good there. They're immediately not a customer. Well, that sucks. So I need to start thinking about having other markets so I can say, okay, now, I have this market, and this market. Here's Maryland. Didn't work for you, but here's those other three. And here's our timeline to deliver that. And either you can be under the covers and know what we're doing. You can sign a letter of intent. You can joint venture with us. You can co-develop. We'll sell you the land. We're this open menu because we're a wholesaler to wholesalers. Unless somebody physically built a campus right next door to me that was very similar, I would have a competition. But right now I could say I have no competition.
Now you're founding a niche, right? So that's different when you're a pioneer or something. Look at, there's a Tesla, but there's an electric vehicle for everything. Doesn't mean necessarily Tesla's always. What I'm saying is you can still have that first mover's advantage even when that market won't be saturated with competitors for you for 5 years.
Probably because it's nothing we do is fast. When I first raised capital, my own and then friends, and then we raised capital with TPG, who's been a great partner. Everything's we're way ahead of our plan. But when I think about something like California and I say, hey, I'm going to go deploy, let's just say for kicks, I'm do 5,000 acres in California. It'd probably be multiple sites, but 5,000 acres total. And I'm going to link it with a massive, amazing fiber ring, and I'm going to tie it into the ecosystem and do everything that we do so well. And we're able to, and fiber rings are 2 to 3 million a mile. I mean, we build at such a massive scale. So we do all that kind of stuff, and we enable it with grid power. Probably never get production in a state like California. When I go to my capital partners, I'm like, because of CEQA approval and because of the difficulties, and even though we might be creating a new economy around what we're trying to do, particularly, I'm probably looking at 10 years till you get a return. Incredibly hard. If I did the same thing in Texas, I could get entitlement in 90 days. I could be churning. I mean, within the first year of acquiring a gigantic parcel, I can be churning dirt and getting ready to enable it. I mean, I'm already doing transactions and sales, and
you pre-lease half that campus, or not half it.
We don't lease, we sell. We sell. So we literally, like, if you were hyperscaler A, B, or C, and you said I need 500 acres and 500 megawatts, I'd probably be much less acreage and 500 megawatts these days, but let's say 200 acres and 500 megawatts. Then I will sell you that piece of land. You will pay me a premium because I have entitled it. I've put in sewage, water, campus-wide fiber conduits. Maybe, and depending on the market, I built to the internet exchange with a duct bank that's unrivaled in scale, like we did in between Ashburn and our campus in Maryland. It's the biggest ever built, ever. 34 2-inch ducts. I mean, we could do 235,000 strands of fiber. It could run the world's internet many times over. So we put all that stuff together. You go and pay me a premium, and you build your data centers or your hyperscaler A, B, or C. And you're like, hey, I'm busy. My teams are slammed. We're deploying all over the world. Can you build a powered shell? I'm like, okay, we'll do that for you. We'll do all kinds of co-development stuff. We're simply a wholesale transaction engine to facilitate rapid deployment of cloud, AI, government stuff, enterprise. We don't care. We're ambivalent. We just do that infrastructure piece. That's our piece of the pie that we play in.
So, yeah, I think that's the next level up, right? That's an unserved area of the market that really you're making the job easier for those enterprise end users or those operators to discover. You're doing a lot of the pick and axe work for them, right? So I think that I understand exactly what you're doing. I was talking about, like, I could see it actually evolving to where I could see like a town is called Snowhorn is the town. It's 2,000 acres and there's schools and it has its own little ecosystem, its own grocery stores.
We legally could be a city.
That's what I'm saying.
In the state of Maryland because it's based on acreage.
Yes.
We literally in that, I don't know about Texas.
Yeah, he lives in Snowhorn now. That's
does
that make sense? I'm like, when is that happening? When do I get to hear about this?
I actually always want, it's funny because there's a ski resort that I read a story about and somebody bought it and it was called Powderhorn. I'm like, oh, so close. If it's just called Snowhorn, I should have gone for that.
Yeah. You know? I'm just saying, like, I'd like to see you make a town in Texas called Snowhorn one day. I mean, here in Texas, don't go to Colorado to make it cool. Like,
but whenever you do that, you look at history, like even there's a lot of car companies where the car guy would name the company after himself, and investors are like, ugh, not another car company named after the guy, you know, because it becomes, while that tends to be what happens, just the nature of the car business. I love McLarens. Bruce McLaren founded McLaren. You know, Ferrari founded Ferrari. You know, this all, Rolls-Royce was, you know, two different folks, Rolls and Royce, right? All these different things that come along. But there's and there are data center companies named after people in our industry.
Maybe.
I love John. He's a great guy, and that's great. You know, I don't think John ever, if you look at his organic history, he never intended to be this guy with data centers all over the country. He had one site that happened to work, and okay, let's call it Sabi, you know. And, you know, one of our investors is Tom Natelli, who develops Natelli Communities. That's great. The company's named after that. I've never worked for a company.
You don't want a town with your name on it, though? That's still like, I don't know. That's pretty gangsta.
There's gangsta and there's ego. Yeah, I don't know.
No, man. You could go punk rock with that. You could even paint like one pinky tail. You know what I'm saying? Like you could have one thing, be like, it's my town. Is there a problem with this?
Yeah, you got any problem with it?
Yeah.
I'm the mayor. Go away.
So
yeah.
So let's talk about, we have a long time, not a long time, but we have time, but we agree that nuclear will be what we evolve into next. And it's an untenable solution. We can't scale. We can't support cloud's demand of adoption yet. So I'm not as worried about AI because I'm like, go nuts. But the amount of power necessary to support the full liberation of what we would want to expect as consumers from AI requires a shit ton more sustainable power than we could offer. So until we fix the power problem, and it's going to take someone like an Elon, it's going to take a disruptive change agent who is like, oh, we can't do that? That you're telling me that that's not what we can do? All right, well, hold my beer.
Make it happen. Yeah.
Right. Does that make sense? The guy was like, what do you mean I can't go give, you know, internet to everybody? I'm going to put some satellites up. What do you mean I can't go? Fuck you. Watch it. I'm going to SpaceX, you know, or, you know, I mean, like, he just needs to, like, this needs to be his next Twitter. This industry needs to be David versus Goliath, and this industry is his slingshot opportunity to go tell we come from an economy that was predicated on oil, and oil produces a lot of things that we use that are in this room, from all the plastics that we use and the way that we drove here and all
not this glorious tequila.
Oh, no.
But a truck did deliver that, probably burning some oil. So, yeah.
But the number one or the most valuable commodity in the world now is data, right? And we live in a digital economy. And the data centers are prevalent for the last 25 years. And there are some people that are aware of it because they have an uncle or a cousin or a brother or their mom or dad was, but like, it's not what kids are going to college and being like, look, when you graduate and you have an engineering degree or a finance degree or whatever it is, like you could go work for one of these things. And you're like,
they don't even think about that.
They don't even think about
especially in the networking business. You would talk about a silver
those are just nerds. Those are psychopaths. People that get in the cross connects.
I'm one of those psychopaths.
I know, that's what I'm saying.
But it's really interesting. So, like, you know, I've been in this business for 25 years. I founded the Global Peering Forum 19 years ago. I was on the board of it for 18 years. Thank God I'm not anymore.
You're on like Nanog and all that stuff too?
I've hosted more Nanogs than anybody in the history of the world. North American Network Operators Group. I've been on the program committee. I never served on the board. That's a little more political for my taste, but yeah, long history with that. And ironically, I'm so busy now, I just don't go to Nanogs anymore. I kind of miss my friends there. But when you go there, everybody's graying out, and people have retired and passed away, and we're celebrating their life afterwards. And I'm like, holy crap. And there's not a lot of new young people coming up.
That's what I'm saying.
And it's this closed, you know, club where like you can come in and you say the wrong things. And I've literally watched peering coordinators who are very powerful and influential turn their backs on somebody. It's like the mafia. And I'm like, yeah, he's not a friend of ours or a friend of theirs, or, you know, the usual mafia terms that you hear, you know. It's wild. Very few young people come in and want to come up in that ecosystem.
Of course.
At the same time, with the peering and interconnection of the internet, you have the peering and the interconnection between eyeball networks or content and eyeballs was driven by the high cost of transit and being able to economize their networks and get better performance between them to deliver your bits. What the problem you have now is you see it with all the carriers. The cost of transit has gone down to microcents. You have folks like Lumen and others who are absolutely struggling, and the biggest carrier in the world, right? That's an amalgamation of Quest and Level 3 and all the other previous carriers. The economy of peering is turning into a traffic efficiency exercise, and it's actually become very automated. So the peering coordinators of the world that manage that did the handshake deals, it's really hardly any contracts on a spreadsheet, or I called it 1 beer, 2 beer, 3 beer peer. You get a little drunk and you're like, okay, I'll interconnect with you. And doing it across multiple exchanges, it's really changed. And that's why you won't see a lot of new internet exchanges. You might see small ones in edge markets, but no big giant ones. It's certainly dominated by Equinix now in the US. And it's an interesting dynamic that changes things, and it's absolutely grayed out or turned into a computer that runs it all. And my God, AI running peering probably do a better job than a human, other than the relationship piece. So it's going to be interesting dynamic changing.
I haven't thought about. I'm not scared of AI. Are you?
No, not at all.
I'm not. I do believe that there are some people that probably got involved with some of the coding of AI that don't really love humanity so much, and there could be some challenges we have. But I don't think we're going to get to like Terminator stage. I just don't think that we will let that resource off the leash yet. I think that we're smart enough, or we've seen enough sci-fi movies to really be fucking worried.
I think so. I consider myself a mega nerd. I don't think anybody around me would question that.
Yeah. Ding ding.
The shit that comes out of my brain.
Oh,
right?
for sure.
And what I've done and experienced and built on the internet. I become an internet gray hair, and I become a mega nerd. I've hardly knowingly used AI. I've done a few things with some of the different AI engines. It doesn't necessitate my life being involved in it. I just don't see it.
And
that's as a mega nerd.
Stages still,
It is. And I have doubts about the survival of the economy of AI.
Oh, you mean like are you talking about like the metaverse?
No, just across the board. How do you, if you today, we talked about 10 billion with a nuclear reactor, you deploy 100 billion in capital associated with data centers and servers and everything else, where is the business behind it to really support it? What I've seen in my history of doing this, and I've had a long enough history to see this, I've never seen such a frenetic deployment pace as what's going on now with AI.
Crazy.
It's awesome for my business. It's awesome for other people in our industry who serve that in some sense or form. But the fundamental side of it is if you take all of the players, be it a startup and lots of dollars going into that will, there's going to be a lot of bubbly dollars going into that. And then the biggest corporations pumping into it that are deploying AI because they have to, because their competitors are. I'm not quite sure they figured out how to really make money around it. And is it going to affect their fundamentals?
Is that any different in the way that the fiber industry got started too? How much money?
Yeah,
how many of those?
But it went bust. It went bust. Is that going to happen?
But
is this going to be Broadwing or all these other companies?
That's exactly what I'm saying. I'm like, yeah bro. It's some of these companies that started it are going to die, and then someone is going to pick up the ball where they left off and keep running with it, and it's going to keep evolving until it becomes what it is today, which is another utility, right? I mean. Yeah, people couldn't even imagine being in a home that had no plumbing or no electricity. I don't think that your children or mine could imagine a home without internet, right? Or some sort of fiber to it. And
are we going to imagine it without AI? I think the AI will be invisible to us. But I don't think it'll be like, let me reach to the AI. It's just going to be part of it. I
think it's an algorithm. I think that AI will be like, and it's going to tell you, it's just going to do math, and it's going to say like today, like the companies like all the groups that were out on the front edge of fiber that don't even exist today.
Mm-hmm. None of them exist today.
Okay. So
none of the original entities.
But the people that were there are now working under another logo or another brand, and they're the ones that made it a third utility. They're the ones that made it to where we couldn't imagine not having it, let alone would someone one day figure out how to make money off it. But those people that started it maybe are the ones that wrote it out long enough where it started becoming financially accretive.
Do you know why carriers are especially long-haul fiber providers, doing really bad now? Because Meta and Google and Amazon and others are building their own fiber. So what happens if you're Lumen and you've now amalgamated Quest and Global Crossing and Level 3 and all the other things that you put together? And I can't even name you have to go on like Wikipedia to figure out all the networks they've amalgamated. and you have 19 billion. That's the only. Somebody told me it's a lot more, but I know 19 billion of debt that you have to restructure and everything else because your fundamental underlying business of transport or fiber or long haul everything is being undercut by your own customers who are now just building their own, and those guys are now driving everything on the internet. And then the cost.
Does that benefit us as the consumer? As anything becomes more commoditized,
it's invisible to us. We don't care,
so
but
we don't see a price change from those carriers that are going to have to make up their margins with us.
Let's change the consumer side. So I don't know, who serves your home?
Yeah, I don't know, AT&T or
okay. I unfortunately have Spectrum.
Yeah, I have Spectrum.
So I've got DOCSIS, so it means I have great download, terrible upload. Yeah. Kind of kills me on some calls and things like that. I'm fortunate in my neighborhood because I live on this airport. Everything's underground. It's awesome. So it's kind of invisible that way. There was AT&T there, but not gigabit scale stuff that I would want. I would multi-home with my own AS number at my house because the internet is so crucial to me that's there. But you as a consumer buying, I don't know if you have gig at home or something or whatever they might offer in DOCSIS. And again, it's not two-way really truly, but what are you paying, $90 a month or something like that?
Probably, yeah.
You're never going to see you're not going to notice it. You'll never see the change. Spectrum as an AS number is interconnected to Infomart. Because guess what? All of our traffic in Texas generally will home to Infomart and punt off to a content provider or another eyeball provider. You don't care. Maybe Meta builds their own fiber network to Infomart. Who gets affected? Maybe AT&T, maybe Verizon, maybe Lumen. CenturyLink's Lumen now, right? It's all been merged into this one entity. So they lose that revenue. And then their business is impacted. Now, there's a lot of restructuring going on with Lumen right now. Are they going to implode because of the massive amount of debt? It's entirely possible. There's a lot of, their stock is at $1.35. Hasn't been like that since like 1984. And it went way below the dollar after their CEO came out and said some things nobody liked. They're doing ironically, their network to the home is called Quantum Fiber or something like that. So everybody sticks quantum on things.
I was in Hawaii. There was a restaurant that was like Quantum Pokey. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, even restaurants are getting down on this name now too?
There's a Quantum Fiber network. I just sent it to my team today. It's from Ohio to Chicago. I'm like, oh, Quantum that. Look at that. And then, that's fine. We don't own Quantum. Quantum Loophole is a real scientific term. It really means something. But, that besides the point. But, I think these hyperscalers are going to build these networks because they looked at it as being more economical and controlling their own destiny. Their networks don't pass every home. It's not their point, unless you're Google Fiber, but that's a different business, right? And that's not everywhere, and it's expanding slowly but surely. Google Fiber, of course, hurts things like AT&T and others because they're forced to deploy fiber and compete. It helps the consumer.
That's what I was trying to get to.
So it was really fun. So I lived in Zilker here in Austin when fiber first came to the market. At the time, I'm trying to think of all the names because they've changed now. I don't know the name now, but it was Grande at the time, Google Fiber, AT&T, and there was one other built fiber. I lived at 701 Kinney Ave, so it was right next to Zilker Park. So right we're like the first neighborhood hit. Yeah. I had 4 fiber providers on my street in front of my house, and I had a long keyhole driveway. I used to have 1/2-inch hardline from Spectrum, and then I was like, that thing's done. And I had to pay for that extra 1/2-inch hardline because of the distance and everything, because it was copper, and I was just waiting for fiber. So as soon as fiber came about, as soon as Google announced, I called my friend Louis Lee, who you might know. Louis, it's always Louis's hat, great buddy of mine. And I'm like, Louis, you're coming to my house first. And
nice.
First thing I had Google Fiber. And then everybody started announcing, and they were all on the poles right down my street. I could have multi-homed to 4 different providers, and they had 4 gigs with 4 different providers, my own AS number. Imagine that.
Yeah,
it was pretty cool.
I wonder if that would have helped the value. You sold that house, right? Because that was like the super energy efficient home.
It was the second LEED platinum house in the city of Austin. Yeah. It was Austin 5-star green, probably 20% premium to build that house to hit my eco goals.
Though. Yeah,
and then divorce happens, and on goes the house. And it's a lovely house. The family that bought it, they're great. Ironically, I won't name them because they're private, but a couple people came by the house. We were selling it privately because it was a special house and it was very valuable. And I had almost an acre in the middle of Zilker, a block, from Zilker
It's
Park.
ridiculous.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And it was a special house. But the third, a famous musician came through that will not be named. A bachelor wasn't his house because it was really designed for family and stuff like that. The third family that came along, I'm like, you look really familiar. And I'm like, where are you from? I'm like, well, Vail, Colorado. I'm like, I used to live in Vail. I'm like, what'd you do there? And I won't say what the guy did or what I did. Well, I was a photographer on the ski slope, so I used to see everybody. I was at my early 20s, but I used to see this guy all the time. I'm like, holy crap, we know each other. It was weird. They're still in that house, and I think it's wonderful that they got to
congratulations
and everything else. But that to enjoy all that, and did it have value to them? It wasn't an internet nerd buying the house, but I'm sure they're pretty happy with their amazing fiber and internet. It happens to be going down that street. Maybe I had something to do with it.
4 gigs into the house, that would have been like another way to charge more for the house. So that's a professional podcaster in there, okay?
Yeah, I'm not going to sell them my AS number, and I don't think they know how to multi-home on a router and do all that kind of stuff.
Who does? Except for people like you.
Yeah.
Well, let me say this. This power stuff, are you scared?
No, I'm not scared. It's just a challenge.
It's going to take a lot of work, man.
The only thing that would scare me is the fool, pity the fool, right? Talking about Mr. T. The fool who comes along and does something terrible for a community or the environment in the interest of a buck.
So I think
somebody will do that, and it's going to be unfortunate.
I don't know. I think that's the part of us growing up. I think the part about us growing up means that we'll self-regulate or self-govern, I should say, with a higher degree of ethics in what we do. So that's
the mature people in the industry.
Well, we're consolidating and aggregating the market right now. So
there's going to be somebody's going to come along with some semblance of arrogance, and they're like, they're going to, excuse my language here, but they're going to say, fuck the neighbors, fuck everybody. I don't care. There's dollars there. And they're going to manage to regulatory wise or anything else shoehorn something in. And I worry, if you ask what scares me. So I'm going to say this. I worry that they're going to taint the industry, and in one place, in one location, that could taint us everywhere because they view us as this homogenous industry.
Parasitic, yeah.
And you have an industry where electricity is flattening the market. So where everything was about Ashburn, because that's where all the internet traffic was passed, and that's where your talent was and everything else to deploy. So that's why you scaled.
The headquarters of the largest company in the United States is based there, which is the federal government.
Right. But that's just one factor. But then now you're seeing this huge push out to Ohio, Missouri. I mean, places where like Mississippi.
But even in those places, it's still going to come down to power.
It is. It's all about power is why they're going there. They're going to underutilize grid areas where the demand hasn't been sapped and where you have adjacent production. And so what I'm saying is that's flattening the ecosystem around the country. Now, my business, we are very, very focused on a low latency approach to the internet exchanges, the big ones, which are immovable objects. That is what we do. Others will satisfy the demand. Either hyperscalers or other parties will buy large acreage out there and tap into that power out there. And it'll be a different kind of demand. It might be the learning process for an AI engine or something like that. But the production will still have to be next to those internet exchanges.
So again, like I said, I think the fifth industrial revolution is designed for us to have a healthier and more harmonious relationships with machines and technology in our lives. I think that our dependency on these machines and the inability for us to support the growth of the adoption rate of emerging technology will force us as consumers to be really smart with how we start utilizing resources, and it'll force a lot of innovation. Mm-hmm. And of innovation is only a product of one, in my opinion, two things: pain or constraint, right? And I think that we can't be a mature industry. I know that you're like, hey man, we are more mainstream, but we're kind of still not, right? I mean, like, I wish we were too. I think that we're the stepchildren. This is the island of misfit toys for industry, right?
Yeah.
But it is the wild, wild west. Like, the soup is not done cooking. Like, this is a blue sky industry. People could come here, and I mean, look, and they could make a difference, right? And this is not the one thing about this industry that I've always found fascinating to my advantage was that this industry doesn't lack intelligence or genius. It lacks a lot of courage and leadership. When I say courage, I mean to challenge people. And I think that this industry is going to really need an injection of new people from the outside looking in that bring passion along with their talent and could look at these solutions and be like, let me apply a different application to this. And they have the fuck you attitude, which is like, why can't I do that? Because you're like, oh, that's the way we always, and then you're like, because you're right, there's always someone that could taint something, right? Like I'm afraid that as this goes mainstream, someone's an asshole and pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered, and they do something that harms the community. And I'm like, I think that the populace now is growing more sophisticated. In some pockets like Virginia, they're armed to the teeth. In other markets, they're more aware of this thing. They've now used this thing, this rectangle in their hand, and they've used it enough to be like, dude, this stuff goes to them. Where does it go to? Oh, what's the name of this? The Sky for the Cloud? Well, I think I was in the meeting when was it you that said that?
Gary came up with that.
I thought it was you. It was the first person I ever heard. But I tell you, one time I used that without citing it.
But Gary's on my board, so I'll say I invented it, and he'll just bitch at a board meeting. So there's nothing he can do.
Whenever I talk to people, I say Gary wasn't even there. I was there, and Josh said it. No, I'm only joking. But my thing is, it's prevalent. You know, you shouldn't copyright. CyrusOne shouldn't copyright that now because that is a keyword or a tricky phrase that makes the adoption rate of this industry faster and easier to understand. Because you could understand the Sky for the Cloud, right? You're like, dude, that makes a lot of sense.
You know the cloud. You hear it said less and less and less and less now. All you hear it talked about is it used to be like AZs, the cloud. We're going to deploy 3 AZs to meet everybody's standard. Like, honestly,
no one is even scared of cloud anymore.
They're not. They don't even just talk about it.
Josh, do you remember the time? I mean, of course you do, because you were at Napa of the Americas when like 500 kW was a big deal.
Oh yeah, it's huge. 100 kW is a big deal. And
now look at what we're talking about here. It's retarded.
I'll tell you my first introduction to the cloud.
I didn't mean that way.
What was the company that was doing? Oh my God, I can't remember the software that was like partitioning servers.
Oh, early
VMware.
days. Yeah.
So VMware was
by Dell or something.
No, it was the storage company.
EMC bought it, and then Dell bought EMC.
Yeah. So that was the first partitioning and slicing and dicing. If you've got soundproofing on your walls here, and you think about that's like partitioning a server, right? And you think about that, and then you're utilizing every bit of that compute. That was my first semblance of ever hearing about partitioning and maximizing, and that was logical. My first taste of the cloud was Joe Minerick. I mentioned him earlier. And he was one of the first Amazon employees building the cloud. A tiny little deployment, a couple hundred kilowatts, like as you talk about. And he comes in, he's like, you really need to do this deal. And I remember at the time, the lawyer at Terramark, I won't name, was being very resistant to their contract because Amazon is famous for having these brutal contracts. And he was just like, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to use fighting tooth and nail as lawyers do. It's about liability and indemnification, the end state of every legal contract. After you get through all the FUD, right? That's it. And I remember him getting on the phone with one of the attorneys from Amazon, the first person and only person actually I've known in my life who truly had a photographic memory, who devastated him. I mean, I've never seen another lawyer wilt so badly. But you know what? It was the right thing to do, and we got it all done, and we got this contract done. And Joe, who's my personal buddy to this day, I don't know how many years I've known. It's been forever now. We go to races all the time.
Is this the photographic memory friend?
No. That was their attorney.
You need to hang out with him more too.
Joe's the chief operating officer at DataBank now. Great guy. Really, somebody should get on the show. Talk about history. He said, you need to do this deal. You don't understand the scale that's coming. And he explained the cloud to me. And it was still this nebulous cloud wave, like up in the sky. I don't understand. And I'm a nerd. And I was like, I don't get what you're talking about. And, it was really just that first taste of that business coming about, and,
what made you understand it though? How did they explain it to you? Were you
living, eating it, breathing it? We're
okay.
taking all that spare compute and selling it to others. There's going to be compute, there's storage, and all has to sit in those locations. And we must be at these places of interconnection to distribute it, to meet everybody. Of course, in the back end, we were just the edge at the time. And then for Terramark, it was the entree into selling and becoming, they became a huge customer, billing millions a month at one point, before I left and before we were acquired by Verizon at the time. And that was a big deal back then. That was recurring revenue, lease stuff. They were actually our very first metered power customer. We were a per rack, per whip.
All in?
We were purely retail colo, like super. Terramark was famous for having the most expensive cross connects in the country because of me. I was the walled garden. I was militant about it, and
because you could charge a huge premium for those because you knew that to get access to that capacity and energy, you had to pay for the cross connect.
We had built that ecosystem of networks, and had done it so organically, and it had held our ground the entire way until all of a sudden, if you want to get to Latin America, that was the only choice. So then the price went way up, and we were able to hold it. That's, Equinix.
You were on somebody's lipstick hit list, I'm thinking, probably 10 years ago. You know what I'm saying? Because you knew your shit to where you were breaking hearts. Keep going.
Yeah, it was for me, it was fun. It was like, everything was a new challenge around the corner. And how do you build an ecosystem from scratch? How do you drive up interconnection revenue? How do you create alternative revenues around it? We had peering ports. Your peering ports or your fabric and exchange is only as good as the number of ASs and eyeballs and content you have on it. So, and at the time, I remember at the time, Equinix would drop their price by $1,000 a port or something. I'm like, we're $2,000 less the next day, right away, because I knew what it cost and what our margins were and everything else. It irritated the hell out of them. But we were just one internet exchange that they always wanted. Verizon came along and bought Terramark at 19 times EBITDA. I stayed on as a key employee for a year. I left to go to CyrusOne, Cincinnati Bell. Then we IPO'd CyrusOne. And then Verizon, like they do to a lot of things they acquire, killed it. And they decided to sell it at a discount. And there were multiple bidders. And the finalists were Equinix, who won it, and CyrusOne. I remember being at the other side of the table across from my old colleagues.
Were you representing CyrusOne?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And we had our whole exec team there. Gary was sitting next to me. And I'm texting him under the table. That's true. That's not true. That's true. Because I knew.
Because you built it. You knew where the bodies were buried.
Every little inch. Every little thing of that. I drew the first line for that building along with a guy named Candido Suarez. Chose the site. Knew everything about it. So it was interesting because, if you think about the self-sustaining ecosystem, particularly of Napa, the Americas, and by no fault of Verizon as the company, but of a large telecom trying to buy that kind of entrepreneurial entity, they killed it because they couldn't understand what they had acquired. They didn't put enough maintenance capital in. They did their sales teams didn't understand how to sell the product, everything else, just flaws that happen. Every single data center, the existing legacy Terramark sites and all of the NFL project sites, there were former MCI WorldCom that they merged into it and everything else, all of that had declining revenue. All of them went down in a data center industry, which doesn't happen. The only one they couldn't kill by their lack of understanding what they had acquired was Napa the Americas, which organically was a self-sustaining engine, the beauty of an internet exchange and what grew with it all. Anyway, Equinix won it all and picked it up. I wanted my baby back because it would have been so cool to.
Sure.
It would have been buying that at the time would have been bad for Terramark because we were powerful enough at the time to do it, but it would have sagged us a bit because it would have been a lot of capital had to go into fixing what.
I would love to get Wojo on the show one day just to hear.
He'll come down. He lives in Dallas. He lives in Park City, Dallas, and Palm Beach. So you just got to get him on the time frame. All he's doing in those RVs.
Yeah, I know. I'm watching his stuff on social media.
But he's on my board. He's on GDS's board. He was on Talon Energy's board.
Really?
When they went through their bankruptcy. He was a bankruptcy board member. That was his purpose. Very educational for him, but that's a nuclear reactor operator. So interesting insight,
We know that program. So, well, listen, let me say this. We're going to have to do another part 2.
Anytime.
How about like in a month from now? Because I'm going to roll out. I'm going to bring on Mark Mills. I'm going to bring
How about after April 12th when legislation passes in Maryland and I can comfortably talk about things?
Yeah. Hey, you know what?
That'd be good.
Why don't we do that? And then I want to just kind of poke you a few times like I did in the beginning of this one. And then you're like a human pinata to me, right? I've always felt like if I could just ask you the right questions and hit you with the right questions,
I'll roll. Yeah.
Like you'll just unload shit. It's like the beauty about why I wanted you on this too is because I speak fast because I'm very passionate about the things that I talk about.
Nobody talks faster than me. There's no way.
You make me feel like I may have I got to go check the number of chromosomes.
But you could have never imagined when you came here that I was going to start spewing that much nuclear shit. There's no way you could have imagined that.
I did not think a network nerd was going to be able to go high, wide, and deep into nuclear, but it does make sense because that's the scale.
Or poo water. Look at me. I know everything about poo water now.
Something told me you had a fetish about that a long time ago. But I just had a feeling that based on the magnum and the volume and the velocity in which you're expecting to play at as a wholesaler to the wholesalers, you have to speak at that language now, and you have to understand that more. So that you're almost a filter between a hyperscaler and these larger developers. You have to be able to sprech in both sides of the language. You know what I'm saying? Does that make?
We have to. And look, we as a service provider, we must be involved. I've signed a power PPA MOU for over 2 gigawatts of power that I can't talk about yet, but thinking about the future so that when our customers come to, as they max out the grid and they're like, well, where are we going to get it from? You're like, look what we've provided for you. And we did that 5 years ago. By the time they need it, they're like, my God, you're like our savior. That's our job to be that.
So, but the difficulty that you have and the empathy that I have for the role that you have as a disruptor of industry is that you're on an island by yourself with a really big fat brain idea, and you will be the savior. But until then, there are a number of people that are paying attention to you, not simply because they want to see you succeed, but because
they want to see us fail. Yeah,
yes.
Absolutely.
So don't give them a fucking show.
Oh,
right?
no,
just keep doing what you guys are doing.
Whenever somebody writes an article, and I've yelled at editors, I'm like,
why would you bother?
You are damaging the industry by feeding them stories.
Come on this,
and they're feeding the hype engine. And I'm like, look, man, what we're doing is the hardest thing.
It is the hardest.
We went 9 stories below the bedrock of the Potomac River twice. We are 13 stories, 130 feet right now below the Monocacy River, boring the biggest fiber ring ever constructed in the history of the world. We're building the biggest campus, the biggest substation ever constructed, and you're going to badmouth us? I mean, everything we do is hard. And
so whenever there's a counter narrative that is, it's got an agenda behind it, then give us the opportunity. Just let us know and use a platform to where we could have this out, because I'll draw it out and let's put it into a 1 minute to 4 minute soundbite that you can go shove back to their faces. Because listen, we look like fools until we make the changes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we are trying to make a mainstream industry, right? Yeah. And to do that, you're gonna have to be willing to look like a fool for a bit until you can become that savior too. So just stay the course.
We're literally, the way it feels and what we're doing at the scale of what we're doing is like we're plowing a virgin farm field and trying to plant a crop. And
you're writing a whole new chapter to the industry is what you're doing.
We are. And I'm happy to come back on board anytime. Kirk, you're 27 minutes from my house. I mean, it's a strain, but I can
fly down, since you got rich white folk problems. Just fly.
Well, I need to learn how to fly a helicopter when I don't have Keyman insurance, and then I can just land on the roof and.
So that, like, the most important question I wanted to ask you before you left, and this is a dead serious question, is, like, if I had to fight Scott Noboom, do you think I could take him?
Oh, hell no. No, he's a black belt. You're dead.
Did you see his hands?
He's gigantic and he's a black belt. You would die.
If he put his hands on my face, I think he could touch his pinky and his thumb around the back end of my head. That's how big his hands were He would
beat you up, and he's straight, but he would call you his girlfriend and you would say thank you. That would be it.
So, like, just to recap what I think you said, yes, then you think I could take him?
Not a chance. Not a chance. He would flick you with his fingers like 9 feet long.
I walked up to him and one time, like last year at PTC, I walked up to give him a hug, and I felt like it was one of Shaquille O'Neal's 4-year-olds hugging him when he was in the NBA still.
And his man breast was on top of your forehead.
I was like, it's so good to see you again, Scott. Give him my best.
I will, absolutely.
Listen, you guys are doing amazing things for this industry. And yes, when you guys are taking that heat, let's talk about it, and let's put it on a video platform to where you can share that stuff, because the chorus sings louder than the soloist. We're in the middle of the 5th Industrial Revolution. You know that. Power is the key to everything that we're doing. That and a very sophisticated labor force. Mm-hmm. And I'll take care of the one part, right? Because I have a selfish agenda behind that. But you have to take care of the other part, and that's why I'm putting all these other luminaries of industry. Christian was on. I have 5 major disruptive change makers that were here during the genesis of the industry, all coming in the next few weeks. And this series should be pretty stacked with everything from where we started to, hey, we have a power problem.
Now you should do what I would say for another show. Besides that, I'm always happy to come down, is bring Christian,
sure,
myself, and Surreal here.
Oh yeah.
So Christian is a Lambo guy, which means he wears a gold chain and has chest hair implants. I'm a McLaren guy, which means my car is faster than everybody else's. And Surreal is a Ferrari guy, which means, well, no, I won't say that. But you should bring the 3 car guys.
You guys should race. He says that hey, listen, not for nothing. He let it slip. I probably shouldn't say, but he may end up shipping his Lambo out here.
Oh, yeah?
Because he said something about how he wants to smoke that ass. I mean, he may not have said that last part. Maybe I made that part up.
Yeah.
But like he may bring his car out, right?
Cool.
So like,
we'll have fun. I run a group called Track Rats, which is there are crown princes in our group. There's billionaires in our group. There's all nerds and everybody else.
All you rich white folks have.
No, you'd be surprised. It's there, and it's not about. There's very wealthy people involved in this. But it's not about that. It's not about the size of your
car
or your jet or anything else you have. Everybody's equal. It's about your lap time, and you're not a douche. And so because it's an email list,
I want to see you race. Let me know.
Well, I have a passenger seat. So not only would you want to see, I want to terrify your mind. You're not going to like watch from the sidelines.
Yes.
Your life will be in my hands. And as you're crying like a baby and dribbling, I have it on videotape.
Right.
We'll put it on the show as you're,
You clearly missed my, I was doing my own stunts at PTC this year. And in my defense, I was watching a video of Hoist Gracie, which he saw my video and he liked it. So I know that I'm the real deal. But Hoist Gracie's sons, a couple weeks before I was out there, were doing.
It could have been the AI Hoist Gracie. You can't know that
care.
anymore. You can't.
He was
know.
my favorite in '93. I watched, or '94. I think it was '94 when I watched him in the first UFC.
Yeah.
So I was trying to do pull-ups from the helicopter, but because
on the skid.
Yeah, and I was like, I don't know how this is gonna go. So I was telling Scuba Steve, I'm like, you got to lower that, boy, in case like. I don't want to die. If I'm going to hit face first on the water, it should be at like 30 feet.
Pull-ups is not about your back gets tired eventually. Your arms get tired.
I can pull
it's
up
your
all day.
hands.
Yes.
So the trick we should have had is like some flesh-colored straps. And you go bloop, bloop, and you're just like, I'm dangling. It doesn't bother me. It can, I pride myself in being able to do a lot of pull-ups.
I could do some. Yeah.
It's always been a big thing of mine.
But the thing is you do pull-ups on a bar when you're trying to do pull-ups on a 2x4 type of thing, like on the skid of the helicopter.
You don't really have.
So I fell right off of it, and then I gave that photo right to my marketing team. I'm like, if you don't make this viral, you're all fired. Or I was not going to fire them. I would just make them have a job that involves touching poop for a living for a week or something. Something fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
But anyways, listen, Josh, it's always good to see. I did not expect you to go so deep on the power stuff, but I'll tell you, like, I'm not surprised a little bit that you could. But let's keep talking about this stuff. And there's other people that need to, like, we need to add momentum to this. So think about the other people that we need to be bringing on that could help rock this ship a little bit back and forth so we could tip things over and get the tipping point we need.
Yeah, absolutely.
You good?
I'm good.
Thanks, brother.
My pleasure.